You're listening to the Business Wealth Impact Podcast, your source for empowering information and cutting-edge ideas from the world's top minds. I'm your host, Jeanne Amlour, founder of seven-figure coaching company, Jeanne Amlour International. Join me on a journey to unleash your potential and create your highest success. Welcome to Business Wealth Impact. Hello, and welcome to another exciting show. Today we have Yarona Boster. She's a communications coach, TEDx speaker, and best-selling author. She uses her 18 years in human development, psychology, and coaching to guide people in modifying their verbal and nonverbal communication skills. Welcome, Yarona.
Thank you for having me today.
I'm very glad to have you because we chatted at length a while ago, and you have a different point of view about quite a few things that I think is refreshing and also coming from a very professional viewpoint. So it's not just an opinion. It's coming from a lot of work, 18 years working with people. So we'll get to that in a minute. But first of all, you've written some books. Tell us a little bit about your philosophy on communication.
Communication is a learned behavioral skill. What's really important for people to understand about that is that that means we have the opportunity to change it and to modify our communication skills. And it's not about just what we say, it's about how we say it. So if you're wanting to communicate with your subordinates or your superiors in a better way, you can do so. It doesn't just have to be a wish. The most important part about this is that it's not just about gaining knowledge either. A lot of people are like, well, I can watch YouTube videos. I can read a book here, read this, that. No, it's so much more than that because it's about putting the knowledge into practice. It is an absolute necessity that you don't just learn what you need to know, but you practice those skills. And of course, any skill that we first engage with is going to be very rough. It's going to be difficult. It's going to require a lot of opportunity for you to give yourself grace and space to make mistakes. But when you have strategic feedback, when you have the ability to even give yourself feedback, that's when everything changes. So one of the first things I always tell people is record yourself. If you really want to know how you communicate, you need to sit down and record yourself for 10 to 15 minutes, just talking about a subject that lights you up, talking about something that's difficult, talking about something that's a bit of a different take on it, whatever it may be. And then watch yourself back. But the way you want to do that, you do not want to do it right away. You want to wait a day because the thing is, once we do something like that, and we pour it out, we're going to still be in this interesting, energetic place with that experience. We're going to have a lot of emotional reactivity to it. So you need to set it aside for a day. And then you watch it back. And the first thing I tell everybody is be as critical as you want to be to yourself. Say, oh my God, I sound horrible. Why am I so nasal? What is with my face? What is it doing? Just go for it. Just be critical. And then allow all that out of you. You have to verbalize that out loud because here's the thing. A thought inside your head is just a thought. When it actually escapes you, it's a behavior. That is something that that people don't realize about communication. Communication is a behavior. It's not something that's about your thoughts and your feelings. We are made up of three things: our thoughts, our emotions, and our behaviors. Only a third of us, of ourselves, can be experienced by other people. We need to experience ourselves that way too. So this is why I want people to actually do it out loud for themselves. Go critical. And then when you rewatch it again, now you're going to critique yourself and you're going to start writing things down. Oh, I make these facial expressions all the time, or this particular hand motion, or I use filler sounds and filler words all the time. Right? So, and write all of that down. Now you're starting to see, okay, how am I coming across? Ooh, even though I know I'm a really smart person I don't sound so smart here because I'm using with every other word, or literally, like, all of these filler words. Filler words and filler sounds are sounds and words that are reductive to what we're trying to say. So we want to actually reduce those things. That's the very first step that I often recommend to everybody and anybody.
Okay, so interesting, because when I first moved to New York many, many, many years ago, when I was living there, I got a job working for a company that was training McKinsey consultants, and we would tape them to get rid of all the ums. So this is nothing new, and I totally dig what you're saying because it's true. And they were shocked. I remember I was the one doing the camera for that. And I remember that I was not the one. I had a mere little job. I was very younger. And I remember that I would hear around the office that they were shocked when they watched themselves, that they could not believe that they said, and these were McKinsey consultants. So they needed to, it was smart that they paid this firm to get them to just that, get rid of the ums and the ahs, because it made them seem not legit to the high end clients. So this is very good basic knowledge, actually. Okay, so that's a really good tip. Film yourself. Now, that's hard for a lot of people to film themselves. We all know that. However, it is correct that we cannot experience ourselves unless we do that as others are. So that's the first tip. I love that. Okay, so once people do that, how do they make the changes?
This requires a lot of psychological strategic change. So one of the first things that I will recommend is to pay attention to your vocal varieties, specifically, and in linguistics, by the way, we call this prosodics and suprasegmentals. But there's a particular thing that happens for people when they use ums and uhs. Ums and uhs are in part our brain's verbalization of the wheels are spinning. I'm thinking about something. Even when you're thinking really fast, even when you're a very fast thinker, you still throw those out there because it's almost the verbal processing of what's going on in your thought process. So I recommend to people, the best thing you can do is every time you feel an coming out or an coming out, pause. Give it a moment. Now, for some people, this is going to still be hard. So I add a couple of things on. First, there is a visualization that you can use. So one of the things that we do when we're thinking is we look up. We have a tendency to just look up to the right, to the left, whichever is our usual dominant side of where we're looking. Although some professionals will say when you're looking to the left, you're actually lying. When you're looking to the right, you're telling the truth. It depends. It depends on cultural. There's a lot of dynamics that go into that. But the other thing I will recommend, that's a visual, like you can actually move your eyes to replace the verbalization. You're looking up. Ooh, I'm in a thought process. I need to look up. The other thing is having something physical to do with your hands is also a great reminder. So let's say you have a rubber band around your wrist and you snap it every time you say or Ooh, snap, snap. It's just going to start integrating into your process of, oh, I just did it. Oh, I just did it. Now your awareness of it is there. Then you're going to take a pause. Take a deliberate pause. Ooh, I don't have an immediate thought coming. Let me take a pause. And the more you practice with it, the better you get. The other thing, and I recommend this for people who feel somewhat secure in themselves and are okay when they make mistakes, ask somebody to check you. Oop, you just did it. Oop, you just did it. And a lot of times you'll find a pattern to the ums, the uhs, and the filler words. So some people, my filler words are so, okay, those are my fillers. What you'll notice with those fillers is a pattern to them. A lot of times they'll either start at the beginning of a thought, they'll start when you're segueing from one thought in the transition to another thought, or they'll come at the very end when you're about to say your final thought. So when you notice your pattern, and you can do this again through recording, oh, I see that a lot of times when I'm about to start a thought, I go into space or filler space. when you notice the pattern, that also gives you the ability to pre-recognize, I'm about to say a thought, so I better wait. Pause, think through that thought purposefully, and then say it. That'll also reduce your fillers.
Okay, so what are the helpful stuff there? What are some of the benefits of people learning to do this in the workplace?
Number one, number one is it's a time cutter. It gives you, it really helps with time management, because instead of circling the wheels in your brain, you're really allowing people to hear everything really clearly. So you don't need to keep repeating it over and over again. Number two, it will make you be perceived from others as more intelligent. Everybody always wants to be perceived as intelligent. And I will tell you this, the most intelligent people can sound unintelligent with fillers. And that's problematic for them because, again, it's not about what you know, it's about how you can communicate it to other people. And if you want to be able to effectively communicate it with others, especially in your work field, you don't want to have to bog through the things that get you caught up in your inability to be effectively communicating. It's very important that we understand other people's perceptions of us. I always try to remind people that when you're in communication mode, it's really important to understand it's not about you. It's not about what you know. It's not about what you can even prove. It's about how well and how effective you are at passing along that information to other people. That's the only way they're going to get it. When you're in a leadership position, the most important thing you need to understand is your impact on the people who you're leading. But your impact doesn't just come from your knowledge and the plans you put in place. It also comes from how well they rely on you, how much they trust you, and how much they're moved and incentivized into momentum and motivation. And it's really hard to motivate people when you're unable to communicate what it is you want them to be motivated to do.
100%. Also, tone is important.
Yes.
Because I know some people that have conveyed to me that they weren't aware that they were like barking. They weren't like barking, they were barking. It was sort of like barking. My filler word is like. So it's important also tone. Tone, because they might be saying something great, but the tone is a bit, okay, wow, that's a bit harsh. And they don't even know it, because I know highly proficient and efficient people don't have time to sugarcoat. It's just like, duh, duh, duh. And then they're wondering why people took it the wrong way. It's because they're not aware. They were just in a hurry. Okay, do this, do. Now, I used to be like that. And I still can be. It's not that I'm being mean. It's just, I have 3 minutes. Hey, team, please go do this. Da. They're used to me, but I don't have time to sit there and sugarcoat. And a lot of people that are very certain type of personality don't think they should have to sugarcoat stuff, just so you're not like barking at them. But sometimes they don't realize that they are barking, correct?
Yes, and I need to go a step further. Sugarcoating means telling them, oh, listen, I understand. You know, it means kind of apologizing for things. It means, acknowledging something and then letting it go, appeasing people. That's really what sugarcoating is. In tone, you can be kind but firm. You absolutely can. You do not need to bark at people, for lack of a better word, to get your point across. You really do not need to do that. In fact, and I would say tone is just one of the vocal varieties as well. There's pitch, there's the pause, there's the rate, the tempo at which you speak, and the volume at which you speak. Those are all huge components to this. Those are what we call the vocal varieties. However, when you can vary it as much as possible, that's when people are more engaged with you. Now, to go back to sugarcoating though, I firmly believe it is absolutely possible to be kind and firm and quick in what you want to say. You can get your same point across saying the exact same words with a different tone.
Agreed. Now, this leads us on to something we talked about at length when we met, and I'm fascinated by this. You have a very different viewpoint about trauma and everything being traumatizing and the coddling of the American public. Let's hear about that.
Yes. So right now, in this day and age, we have a circumstance where so much, especially for our younger generations, our Gen Z and our young millennials, have a tendency to look at everything from the mental viewpoint, from the psychological viewpoint of trauma. And a lot of this stems from the fact that the younger generations got a lot more engaged and involved in looking for therapy, looking for mental health options. How do I get myself better? And what happened? Well, words like trauma are utilized in the mental health profession, yes. But unfortunately, once a terminology like trauma comes into the public sphere, it tends to get overgeneralized. And this is what we're seeing now. We tend to take something that we understand, that we know from a therapeutic model, from a psychological model, and then once it becomes a known thing, it starts to become a label we can just plop on stuff, inappropriately so. And so my philosophy on this, and also my mindset, and frankly, a lot of people in the mental health profession, will try to help people understand that something can feel traumatic, but it's not it's not trauma in and of itself. Something can feel difficult. It can feel overwhelming. Those feelings are valid, but to label it as trauma is actually to do the process of that thing that you're experiencing a disservice. For instance, you go into work and you were 10, 15 minutes late and you tell your boss, I'm so sorry. And your boss yells at you. And you go back to your desk and like, oh my God, I've been traumatized. That was horrifying. That was awful. Once you put that label on it, it pins it in place and makes it a bigger deal than it actually is in reality. We have to get to a place where we can process our difficulties in the everyday. Because here's the thing, I hear this on repeat all the time. It's not fair that my boss doesn't like me. It's not fair that I have to work late on these particular days. It's not fair that I've been scheduled at a time I don't want to be. The truth is, no one ever promised fair. And the reality in the world is that there are going to be moments of inequality. There are going to be times of strife and difficulty. There are going to be hard days, good days, and everywhere in between, magnificent days and horrifying days. But if we label all the difficult moments as trauma, I've been traumatized, I've been triggered, I've been, I need a safe space. We end up doing ourselves a disservice because we pretend that we as humans are too fragile to handle these things. That's what the word trauma really does.
So good.
And when we pretend we're too fragile to handle these things, then we end up being too fragile to handle these things.
Because we're telling ourselves that over and over and over and over again. Yes. Okay.
Exactly.
That needs to be said, because I truly believe that we are training people to be weak in our society.
Yes.
It is just, we're triggered all the time. We cannot be triggered. We're traumatized by everything. Of course, trauma is there. Everybody goes through trauma, actual trauma. But I agree with what you're saying. And I think it's so important for people to hear this message so they can situate where that is. Okay. Oh, maybe that wasn't traumatic. Maybe I've made that traumatic. It's going to be get to the point where you can't speak to somebody because if it's not the right tone, well, I'm traumatized by your tone of voice. Not really. So that's a problem. By the way, let's talk a little bit, because you have a very interesting background and you've certainly gotten through a lot of hard things and you're so positive and happy and really admire that. So tell us a little bit about how you got to all this work.
Let's see, I'll go really far back and then I'll speed up. I'm the daughter of a Holocaust survivor. My life started out in a place where I understood that there's a lot of cruelty and difficulty in the world. As my life continued on, lot of difficulty, a lot of trauma, real trauma of significant events in my life. I'm an assault survivor, child of divorce, divorced from a first very severely abusive person. And then I started to experience death, a lot of death, including taking care of my loved ones into their deaths and infertility issues. So the list goes on. But one of the things that I figured out is that if I'm not going to learn from these things that happen to me, then I'm going to be stuck wallowing in the things that happen to me. And it started to help me understand, wow, the way I'm communicating with myself is not good. So how do I want to feel about these things? I say this all the time. You cannot always control the things that happen to you, but you can choose how you want to respond to it. It's true you can't control a situation in which somebody cuts you off and you get into a car accident. How do you want to respond to it? You can't control if your boss is being particularly difficult, but you can choose how you respond to it. And the first thing starts with communicating to yourself. How do I want to respond here? How do I actually want to be here? And what do I want to learn from this? That communication with the self has to start by verbalizing things. I tell people all the time, the power of the spoken word. And by the way, I speak to myself out loud all the time.
So do I. My kids think I'm crazy. They're in the other room saying, Mom, were you talking to yourself again? I'm like, yeah, I was.
But it's true. And I go back to the psychology of it because the spoken verbalization of our communication reinforces something. And so if we say to a friend, oh, I was traumatized this morning. My boss yelled at me for 30 minutes. We've just reinforced that belief. If we say that to ourselves, oh, I'm not good at this. I might as well just give up. Forget it. We've just put it out there, verbalized it, and reinforced it. So the first thing that I started to do was realize, well, how do I want to feel about all this stuff that's been happening? One of my miscarriages that happened when I had just decided to finally bring in hospice for my mom, and I took care of her in her home. I had to say, well, what does this mean to me? Well, I couldn't process it at that moment. And I said, all right, this has to have some kind of meaning behind it. I have to learn from this experience. Otherwise, it's just a part of another horrible thing that's happened to me. And that's what I chose to do. I said, what can I learn from this? What can I learn from this? And as soon as we opt to try to learn from the difficult things, that's when we really change in the way we perceive trauma and the way we communicate with ourselves and with others and in the way we move about in the world.
I'm sure that you're a big fan of Viktor Frankl's book, correct?
I am.
I mean,
Yes.
incredible that he could even write that book, but so inspiring is not the word. Incredible that somebody could go through all of that and have that kind of a viewpoint. It's truly remarkable. And what an incredible example of strength and courage. That even in the worst conditions, he had a completely different viewpoint from all the people around him. So the question is, well, first of all, you wanted to respond to that.
I do. And I think a huge part of that has to do with the victim mindset that we've played ourselves into. We kind of boxed ourselves into that corner in this day and age. And this also goes along with the whole trauma aspect of things. A lot of times, and Victor and many, many, many people who have gone through things like the Holocaust and things where they've been dehumanized, they come to an understanding of you either completely break, or try to learn something from this, try to find some measure of meaning from this experience. And I really firmly believe that the victim mindset is the inability to have any desire to learn from your experience, but rather the desire to say that your experience is someone else's responsibility.
Right. And victimizing oneself, in effect, which is an addiction of the human being. Humans are addicted to victimizing, complaining, and feeling sorry for themselves. And it's almost pleasurable that they figured out that that's actually like pleasurable to have those feelings in a strange, strange way. So now this is my big question. You did not start off being how you are now. I'm guessing that you went through all of that and came out of the rinse cycle to be who you are now. Am I correct?
Well, I will say this about my personality. I figured out when I was 16 that I needed to decide how I wanted to respond with the Holocaust situation. I was in Israel. I went through the Holocaust Museum there. And when I came out, I was bawling and I was like, wow, I was in such horror because I had gone through the children's section and it was just really painful. And I came to this understanding. I said, okay, I could either be horrified at the cruelties of others, or I could look at the hero side of the people who chose to help save and rescue my father and his sister out of their own. They literally put their actual lives on the line. And I could choose in that moment, do I focus on the horrors and the cruelty people can get to, or do I focus on the hero aspect of people, the heroic actions of others? And that was that first moment I realized I could choose. I could actually make an active choice here. I couldn't choose to change anything about what happened, but I could choose what perspective I was going to take on it.
Which is powerful because he did survive. So,
yes, I wouldn't be sitting here.
Exactly. So that's called living in the gain and not the gap.
Yes.
Wow,
And I
how
chose that.
powerful. And then I'm guessing that you took a while to figure all this out. It's not overnight that we change.
No, it's not overnight, but it does take a lot of active communication with yourself. A lot of people I see are in reactivity life, living, meaning something happens to them, they react. Something happens, they react. I like to put people into responsive living, where something happens and you take your time to say, how do I choose to respond to this thing?
Well, that's a very powerful way to work through this. And congratulations, and God bless you on. You're such a positive person and full of light and sunshine, and I love that. Obviously, so tell us if you were going to give one bit of advice or mindset. What would you tell people about life?
Don't get caught up in your own mistakes. Acknowledge them, accept them, and then ask yourself what you're going to do differently. I see so many people just mired in the mistakes they've made, feeling guilty, feeling ashamed, feeling like they can't make a change. They can't do anything. They're just going to keep having that same thing happen over and over and over again. Or they don't see, they put blinders onto the mistakes they make and say, nope, it's not possible for me to make mistakes. I never make mistakes. What are you talking about? I didn't do that. That's not me. When we either get so caught in the mistakes or we try desperately to not acknowledge the mistakes, we're stuck on a hamster wheel of mistake making. It's inevitable that we will make mistakes as human beings. That's the nature of who we are, right? What is the famous saying? To err is to be human. And it's very true. So once we get over that hurdle of saying, look, oh, I made a mistake. Own that mistake. Say, yep, oh, I did that. Oh, okay, my bad. I did that. What do I need to do now? What did I learn from this? What do I need to do now? What did I learn from this? What do I need to do now? It is the best way to operate with the assumption that you're going to make mistakes. Don't assume you're going to be perfect. Just assume you're going to make a mistake. You can even ask yourself every morning, oh, I wonder what mistakes I'm going to make today. Now, that said, if you voice that, then there's a higher chance that you'll make more mistakes that day. But you can say, hey, it's possible I'll make mistakes today. And what do I want to do when that happens? That's a better question to ask yourself in truth. And I think it also helps set you up for the understanding that, yes, this is my mistake. I made this. How do we keep going forward?
Good stuff there. You missed the second part of that.
Yes. Tell me the second part. Reset the second part for me.
To err is human. To forgive is divine. Alexander Pope.
Yeah. Thank you.
So that I was thinking, well, she missed the second part, which is just as important as the first part. To forgive oneself is divine as well. So thank you, Yarona, for turning up. This is amazing, for sharing all your wisdom and beauty and goodness and experience. And thank you, everybody, for listening. If you want to check out Yarona, everything is in the show notes. And Yarona, what is your website?
It is yaronaboster.com.
Keep it simple. Thank you so much. Thanks for listening, and we will see you on the next one. You're listening to the Business Wealth Impact Podcast, your source for empowering information and cutting-edge ideas from the world's top minds. I'm your host, Jean Amlour, founder of seven-figure coaching company, Jean Amlour International. Join me on a journey to unleash your potential and create your highest success. Welcome to Business Wealth Impact.